Good evening, everybody. My name is Steve Fradkin, and I want to welcome you all on behalf of the Stoughton Chamber of Commerce to the Candidates Forum for State Senate, and that's the only office we're going to be discussing tonight is State Senate. The format is going to be a 1-hour program, televised live, as you can see the cameras are running. It's on Xfinity Channel 98 and FiOS Channel 24. There'll be opening remarks for each of the candidates. I'll have 2 minutes to make those opening remarks. Oh, okay. The candidates will be asked questions. We have a bunch of questions to ask. There'll be no rebuttals because of the time constraint, but each candidate will get a chance to answer the question with a full allotted 2-minute time. A committee on the Stoughton Chamber of Commerce wrote the questions. The Chamber is not a political organization. There are no endorsements for the Chamber and no favorites or anything like that. It's primarily a business organization. Our timekeeper over here on my left, your left too if you're in the audience, is Robin Zoll. The time limits will be strictly enforced. Please be succinct if you can, because the more you can say, if you can answer in less than 2 minutes, it'll be good, because that'll give us more time for questions. There will be audience questions if there is time. We're on a very tight schedule because it's only a 1-hour program, and so if we have time, we'll have a few audience questions. And then closing remarks will be 2 minutes per candidate. All of the candidates for State Senate were invited. All of them aren't here, but they were all invited. Norfolk, Bristol, Plymouth District is the district that we're in, by the way. Primary will be held on September 8th. There will be 2 Democratic candidates, where one will be eliminated on the 8th. Then Mr. Lott is unenrolled, and he'll be on the November ballot, but facing the winner of the Democratic primary. Nora Harrington is on your left. She is a Milton resident. She's a Democrat. John Lott was born and raised in, what was this town? Stoughton. And he's unenrolled. And State Representative Walter Timilty, who is a Democrat, is a Milton resident, but apparently couldn't quite make it. Why am I having trouble opening this? Okay. Sorry, they are still asking you to talk louder. Yell. As I mentioned, all the candidates were invited. The Sharon Stoughton League of Women Voters was the original sponsor of this event. Representative Timilty was offered this and several other dates and times. He was available for none of them. He offered no alternatives, even though he was offered a chance to do that. The League of Women Voters then declined to sponsor a no empty chair debate. So we're going to ask some questions and hope that everybody cooperates with the time. Again, keep an eye on Robin, because she's the one who's got the time going. Question number 1. Why don't we start with Nora? Oh, wait a minute. Before we do that, we want to have opening remarks. So let's give you 2 minutes of opening remarks.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate that you're all here this evening, and thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for sponsoring this forum. As you know, this is the first time in 18 years that this seat is open, so it's a very important thing that we all take this election very seriously and learn all that we can about the candidates. So I really appreciate you being here. So my name is Nora. I live in Milton with my spouse, Andy, and our 2 children. And I've decided to run in this race because I think from time to time it's really important that we send new people with new ideas to Beacon Hill. I think for our democracy to work best, we need people with a variety of backgrounds, with a variety of skills, and with a variety of points of view. That's what really is going to make our democracy rich and make sure that it's representing everybody. So I'm eager to jump into this race and bring some new blood to Beacon Hill. A little bit about my background. I was actually born in the Bronx, and perhaps like some of you here, my parents were immigrants. They were Irish immigrants. And we grew up very modestly in a very small apartment because my parents came here with nothing, like many immigrants do. But in our neighborhood, we were actually fairly lucky because my dad was a carpenter and he was a union carpenter. And those days, with one pretty good salary, you could move on in life. And so my parents were eventually able to buy a house and send me to college. And that education made all the difference in my life. And that's really one of the core reasons why I'm running for this office, because I want all kids to have that opportunity. And here in Massachusetts, it's such a high-cost state, that's gotten harder and harder for people, especially for working families. So it's very important to me that I go to Beacon Hill and be a voice for families who are working really hard to get ahead and create a better life for their kids. I've been in the area about 25 years now, and 12 years ago, my partner's a psychologist, and she wanted to start a mental health practice, a group practice. So I left my job, we started this group of 2 initially, and today we have 70 employees in the Boston area. That's across 4 locations. So I know a lot about working hard, I know a lot about getting things done, and putting groups together. And I would love to work on your behalf, and especially with Stoughton, to work on economic development and business opportunities here in the town of Stoughton. Thank you very much.
Thank you. John Lott, your opening remarks, please.
Thank you, Stoughton Chamber of Commerce, for hosting this event. I'm a lifelong resident of Stoughton. I've been living here since I was born here 24 years ago. I am not your typical politician. I'm an independent candidate, so I'm not going to be on the primary. I think the 2-party system is fundamentally flawed. I think it's broken. I think it's anti-intellectual. I'm running to be a better choice outside of the 2-party system. I'm a middle school teacher and a high school teacher. I teach Latin. I think the opioid epidemic is the biggest problem in Massachusetts right now. In 2 minutes, I don't really have time to explain all this, but I do have some pamphlets that you can pick up at the back of the room. I also want to get rent and housing prices down. I'm pro clean energy. I want to fix the MBTA. I'm the only politician in this race who's actually listed my phone number that in my pamphlets back there. So I gave you my cell phone number. I want to be your senator who is very accessible. I don't want to be someone who hides behind a bunch of different office aides and barriers. I want to be someone who you can talk to directly, who you can contact without difficulty or jumping through a lot of hoops. I don't dress in fancy suits. I don't come from money. I don't live in Milton. I live in Stoughton. I'm a town meeting rep. I was proud to vote for the new high school in town meeting and at the April election. So please pick up some of my information. Check me out online. My website is lot2016.com. I want to be your state senator. I humbly ask for your vote on November 8th.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now the questions. This microphone all of a sudden got very loud, didn't it? Stoughton is part of Brockton Area Transportation, and other nearby towns are part of the MBTA, and thus received much improved services for transportation to doctors, shopping, etc. on the ride, particularly to Boston doctors and hospitals. How would you, as senator, work to get Stoughton the same level of services our residents deserve? We'll start with Mr. Lott.
Thank you. So, as you know, if you live in Stoughton, we don't have commuter rail access on the weekends. Saturday and Sunday, you can't take the train into Stoughton. That's disgraceful for a town that lives so close to Boston. We need to have weekend rail access into the city. So that's one thing I want to do. I also want to expand parking lot sizes at a lot of local train stations, especially Sharon, which has a very, very small parking lot. I'm against the South Coast Rail, which has been a project proposed, I think, back in the 80s that would extend the Stoughton line down to Fall River. I think it's just enormously expensive, and it's just not worth the improvements that we'd put into it. It's a little unrelated to Stoughton, but I think that late night tea access needs to be brought back inside Boston because there are a lot of people who don't have cars, who work late jobs, who need that late access in order so that they can actually make money and pay the absurdly high rent that comes with living in the city. So to bring it back to Stoughton, I think bottom line, so we're getting a new train station, or it's being refurbished, I'm sorry, which is great. But bottom line, it has to begin with getting more access to trains. If you look at the weekday schedule for taking the commuter line from Stoughton into Boston, you get one train at 10:40. And then the next train, I think it's 2:20, it might be 2:40. That is an absurd amount of time to wait in between trains. We need to have another train in between that, maybe leaving around 12:20. People will never ride the commuter rail if the hours are so inconvenient. So improving service, getting more trains actually moving in Stoughton will improve the quality of rail service, because there'll be more people taking them who are lobbying the government in order to improve the MBTA.
Thank you. Ms. Harrington, same question. Do you need it repeated?
No, I think I'm okay, thank you. I think the question also goes to what I was saying originally about needing a diversity of opinions and a diversity of viewpoints on Beacon Hill. I think all too often we have legislators who aren't thinking about what's happening with somebody who may be carless, what's happening with somebody who may need the access to the ride. And I think we need legislators who are going to meet with residents, sit down, and really talk about what's going on and be an advocate on Beacon Hill. Stoughton is so well located for transit-oriented development. This could be, I know, the downtown is being refurbished, and there's so much energy going on in Stoughton right now with the new high school. And this is a wonderful location for developing workforce housing that can get people into the city. And, and that's what our state is trying to do right now. So we really need to call attention to the benefits of Stoughton as one of those hubs. And if we can do that and start thinking about it more holistically, housing, economic development, transportation, I think that could, we would have the reason, we'd be able to convince Beacon Hill of the reason for why it'd be so important to improve transportation in and out of Stoughton. I'll stop there.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Next question, we'll start with Nora Harrington. Please share your views about the South Coast Rail Project, including your knowledge of it, updates on current activities, and your opinion about it for Stoughton only.
Sure. As I've been around knocking doors and meeting with residents in the district, I have heard a fair amount about the South Coast Rail Project, and I know many, many people are disturbed at how it would cut through the center of Stoughton. I also heard people who were interested in it and thought that, there needed to be better access. I'm pleased. It sounds like the alternative route through Middleborough seems to be gaining traction and is likely we're going to be moving towards that. I think the cost of the overall project is certainly something that has to be revisited. When it was initially suggested, it was so many years ago that now we're talking about billions of dollars and more money. So we need to look at that, whether or not that's going to be a priority for the MBTA. And honestly, with where the MBTA is right now, it's hard to imagine that they're really going to make the South Coast Rail that much of a priority. So I need to learn more, but I do believe that having the South Coast Rail cut through Stoughton is probably not the best option. Thank you. I'll leave it there.
Oh, okay. Mr. Lott, I know you dealt with this a few minutes ago, but...
the South Coast Rail, it would be an okay idea if it didn't cost so much money. The cost is prohibitively high. As Nora said, we're over $1 billion. $1 billion for a train line. Frankly, it's absurdly high. And if it were to happen, and the whole taxpayer base of Massachusetts were to fund it, I would rather have it go through Stoughton than Middleborough, because at least Stoughton would benefit from it. But frankly, we've been fighting this since the 80s. The Stoughton selectmen, they sued the state or the MBTA. They sued somebody in order to basically halt the process of it. And but here's the thing: the MBTA, they've been pouring money and money into studies and evaluations and contractors' opinions for this rail line for so long that it feels like it's inevitable in the long run, like 40 years from now. I feel like it's going to have to happen. I don't want it to happen if the price tag is going to be so outrageous, and I don't think most people want to have to pay for something like that when it's so outrageously high, when frankly, if we just got rail access on the weekend, Stoughton's train problems, most of them, would just vanish.
Thank you. This question will go to you, Mr. Lott, first. Please share your knowledge and views about the Spectra oil pipeline. Updates and activities, how it would or would not affect Stoughton, what you would plan to do to make sure Stoughton is protected.
Great. So I'm proud to say I do have a No Spectra Massachusetts sign in my front yard. I met with Carolyn Barthel, who is the leader of the Mass Energy Alliance, or I don't know, Mass Power Forward. And then I met with Emily Kirkland, who runs 350mass.org, and I was with them at the meeting where they first brainstormed the pipeline march, which I did participate in. I went to a rally in Canton, and then I walked with them, and then I met Congressman Lynch at one in West Roxbury. So the Spectra pipeline, it's a pipeline by Spectra that they proposed, and they wanted to build it. And it was in several parts. Part of it goes from Weymouth. Another part goes from, I think, Franklin. It would go through Stoughton for part of it, among other towns, Canton and West Roxbury and so forth. And it was basically the energy company, they wanted the consumers to pay for the cost of building this pipeline on your energy bill, but we weren't going to benefit from the natural gas. It was going to be shipped out of state and out of the country, indeed, in order so that these big energy companies, Spectra among others, they could basically sell this gas and profit off of it. So we never stood to benefit from it. We only stood to pay the price tag. Fortunately, the Massachusetts Supreme Court struck down the pipeline tax, so it looks like the project is finally dead. Thank you. That doesn't mean that other pipelines, for example, there was one in Otis State Forest, a real small one, that had to do with the pipeline companies who are building it on protected land. And unfortunately, well, right now it is being upheld, but Attorney General Maura Healey is challenging that court hearing. So basically, I'm opposed to the Spectra pipeline. I helped protest with it. I'm very pro clean energy. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Harrington, same question.
Great, thank you. Yes, new pipelines is not the way that we should be moving as we're trying to develop new energy sources for our state and for our country. We really need to be investigating clean energy in the form of solar, wind, and other projects. So I am also opposed to the Spectra pipeline project, and I was also very pleased when the Supreme Judicial Court struck down the tax, the tax on consumers. This is one of the reasons why we need new voices and new ideas on Beacon Hill. Because frankly, I think when people have been up there a very long time, what they tend to listen to perhaps are the voice of lobbyists. Every industry in our state, every business industry has lobbyists. And they're up on Beacon Hill and they have the ear of our legislators. And if you're a legislator who's up there for years and years and you're running for re-election all the time, you need money. And it would be very easy to be influenced in that way. So, when I go to Beacon Hill, I plan to be an independent voice for what I really believe in and for what the people in my district believe in. I think we need more people who are willing to stand up to lobbyists and certain interests in certain industries, and especially that would be the kind of dirty fuel industries. So I'm against the pipeline. My campaign manager and I also, Kathy Fagan, we also started in Stoughton, actually. We attended the rally here, and then we walked to Canton with the crew in that very hot 95 degrees day. And it was wonderful to be with so many activists, and it was wonderful to see people coming together to do the right thing for their community. So that's where I am. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will start the next question with Ms. Harrington.
Sure.
Please share your stand and support that stand for LGBTQ rights and the current transgender issues in the news.
Yeah, thank you. That almost seems like a question that we shouldn't even be asking anymore in 2016. But no, I appreciate the question because
I didn't write the questions. I'm only reading them.
As an out LGBT person, I am very proud of how our state has come along. 13 years ago, we were fighting for marriage equality. And at the time, not everybody was there. And there were many times over that 3-year period from about, 4-year period perhaps, from about 2003 to 2007, where we thought we might lose marriage equality. Even 4 years later, after it had been approved, after it had already been law and people were already married, there was still thinking that our opponents would get it on the ballot and get people to vote on civil rights. So thankfully, and this is why our state government is so important and who we elect to the legislature is so important, thankfully we had enough legislators who came around to see that this is a civil rights issue and everybody deserves the same rights. But it was close. And we have to keep that in mind. Some people, obviously not you folks, but some people don't realize the impact that a state legislator has, not just on their own district, but on these statewide issues. So I'm very pleased with what's transpired over the last 13 years. The trans movement, so many people, we've been awakened to the issues that our trans brothers and sisters face. And that's progress, and maybe that's the meaning of progressive, right? That we're always moving forward. So I'm proud to live in Massachusetts, and I want to go to Beacon Hill to make sure that we continue to move forward, and that rights are never something that we're pulling back, but there is an expansion of rights over time. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lott?
So I'm proud to say that I am in favor of same-sex marriage. I support the transgender bathroom bill that passed earlier this summer. I think, like Nora said, I'm totally pro equal rights for equal people. I think we've come a long way. I sort of wonder how much farther there is actually to go. It seems like we've made so much more progress. I'm not sure what there is to be done still. Mr. Timilty, Representative Timilty, on the other hand, has been a consistent opponent of same-sex marriage. He voted against it. He voted against having out-of-state couples who are the same sex get married way back when. He was opposed to adoption rights from back then. He originally voted against a different transgender bill that I believe, and then I believe it was only because Nora and I were actually running that when the bill came around again, the different one this summer, that he actually voted for it. So I think it's very important that people like Nora and we put pressure on people like this in order to have them actually vote in the correct way, rather than the way that some career politicians who feel like their job is an entitlement rather than something they have to earn, voting the way that he personally wants rather than the way that ought to be. So I'm proud to say that I am an ally of LGBT people. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lott. Mr. Lott, please share your stand on pro-life, pro-choice issues.
Okay. I'm pro-choice.
Yeah, that's a bombshell, I know.
That's it. I'm pro-choice. I'm proud to be pro-choice. Nothing more to be said.
Okay, Ms. Harrington?
Sure, thank you. Yes, I can unequivocally say that I will always support a woman's right to make her own reproductive health care decisions. And I do consider that a civil right. The decision of somebody to make the most personal, private decision has to be a civil right. It's not something that we can leave to a vote or to the decisions of other people. And in this race, I am the only candidate in the Democratic primary who can say that. And unfortunately, my opponent has taken many votes to the contrary over his career as a state representative. And that issue is so important to so many people, to women, but also to men who fully believe in the ability of a woman to decide what's best for her. There are other corollary issues that go along with this, and that's access to contraception. It's at what age do we let younger people make the decision and the involvement of their parents? So there are a lot of other issues that we have to continue to work on. And I think sometimes people think that choice is a settled matter in Massachusetts. It's not exactly a settled matter. There's so many other issues that come up. In the mid-90s, John Salvi did an awful thing and broke into our clinics and murdered people at Planned Parenthood clinics. Then there was a law to put a buffer zone in place to require protesters to stand back and to let people access a clinic without the harassment and without the threat of violence. And unfortunately, my opponent voted against that law. Then there was another law. Then there was another law that would allow the police to remove people who were physically blocking the door of a Planned Parenthood clinic. And my opponent voted against that law too. So even though choice itself may be settled in Massachusetts, there are issues around it regarding safety, access, that still matter, that still are kind of health and safety issues. And we definitely want people on Beacon Hill who are going to vote to protect the health and safety of everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, audience, but we really would appreciate not interrupting with applause. Okay, Ms. Harrington, please tell us what you think are Stoughton's 3 most important concerns at the present time, and how you would help Stoughton with these concerns, and how the state Senate could impact them.
Thank you very much. Stoughton is a town that I see it is well positioned for just continued upward mobility over the next few years, inviting more young families into Stoughton to sort of continue its growth and prosperity. And I think that the high school project was a huge step forward in that. And I really want to commend all the folks here who worked on the high school project. I'm very excited for you. And I know that school building projects will continue to be something that needs to be worked on as other buildings start aging out of their useful life. So that's one issue where I think the state senator can absolutely help on, working on the funding for school building projects, which again will draw more young families to Stoughton. Likewise, the downtown district. You have a wonderful downtown with really a great layout and a great way for people to walk from shop to shop. And as somebody with an who works in a small business, as the chief operating officer of what's a large small business now, I would be really excited to work on that. I was also actually an economics major in college. So economics and economic development has always been a big interest of mine. The third issue, I think probably just open space conservation, the environment, certainly the pipeline has continued to be an issue. So those are 3. I'm not going to say that those are your definitive 3 issues. I think transportation is definitely one. And as a state senator, my plan would be to meet with community leaders in all of the towns in the area and find out what are the needs, what does the community want next, and how can I help?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lott?
All right, so the 3 priorities I would say, last year I would have said education, but since we got the new high school going, I think that's been a little bit down on the list. I think transportation, which I've already addressed at length. I think the economy, especially the downtown center, we have the building that, I don't know exactly what they're building there, but it's basically, there's a fence and it's basically a vacant site. And then we have the State Theater, which has been, virtually abandoned for a long time. So getting bringing business to Stoughton. We have Sonic coming. We have Daddy's Dairy is great. We got plenty more new restaurants that are coming in. Ultimately, we need to have a little more than restaurants, but the economy. But the number one issue, which I want to spend most of the time talking about, is the opioid epidemic in Massachusetts. Now, of all the 300 and whatever cities and towns in Massachusetts, Stoughton, this is a list including Boston, Worcester, Springfield, of all these towns, Stoughton ranks 10th on the top of most opioid overdoses from 2012 to 2015. This is a giant problem. You might be going for a walk, you might see needles somewhere on the side of the street at the end of your driveway. You read about, right down my street on Britton Ave, there was a drug bust like 2 weeks ago, not even, where the police got a bunch of cocaine and fentanyl and heroin and all these drugs that was right down the street from me. It's getting out of control. We need to bring, I don't have a whole lot of time to go into this, but we need to bring Gloucester's Angel Plan to every city and town in Massachusetts. We need to have needle exchanges, 1 for 1, I think at every police station in the state. We need to aggressively push Narcan to lower the prices down and get it more accessible places. I'm in favor of question 4, which is legalizing cannabis, which I think will deny diversified drug dealers of their money. There are many other things. Please check out my website. Opioid epidemic is the biggest problem in Stoughton and I think in Massachusetts right now.
Thank you. Mr. Lott, gun control is much in the news. Please share your views, personal and public, on this issue and how, if the state Senate would, could the state Senate impact this issue, pro or con?
Okay, so this is, I guess, an issue where I don't exactly side with most establishment Democrats. So Massachusetts, we already have some of the strictest gun laws in the state. And people talk about like assault weapons, which are just semi-automatic weapons, and they talk about magazine capacities. I don't want to legislate any of that. I would like to get a truly universal background check, including gun shows. Everybody who buys a gun, private or personal or business sale, whatever, should have to pass a background check, period. We have some of the strictest gun laws in the entire nation. Really, we can't make them that much stricter, I think. Criminals who want to get these weapons, they can go out of state to get them, they can go on the black market to get them. If you're really worried about gun violence, you can't deny law-abiding citizens the right to purchase, own, and maintain their own weapons. So it's a Second Amendment right. I don't think we should have automatic weapons, and I think that many of you can probably think of someone who probably shouldn't own a gun that you know. But I think that really, as long as they're using the gun legally, or just not using it at all, just having it, that's really none of our business. That's not something that we should interfere with. It's also a Second Amendment right.
Thank you. Harrington?
Sure. I stand with our Attorney General in her recent decree that we need to enforce the gun laws that banned automatic weapons and get rid of the loophole that allows certain weapons to be modified to become certain weapons to be legal, and yet they have a small modification that can be made to make them assault weapons. So I think that we need to live with the spirit of that original law, which was to get rid of assault weapons. And unfortunately, as in everything in life, a loophole was found that allowed certain weapons, to be legal, yet they could easily become assault weapons. So I just want to say that first. I think assault weapons are not necessarily, it's not something that we should have for personal use. I think they're just too dangerous. And at this time, I don't oppose a person's right to certainly own a handgun or a rifle. Somebody who has a license. Ideally, I think we should start putting more training for people, who want to own a handgun. But at this time, I would say that is somebody's right. The much more dangerous issue is with automatic weapons. At the same time, the simple act of owning a handgun makes somebody much more likely to die by gun violence. And while background checks are great for criminal activity. Background checks. We cannot put everyone who may have some mental health issue on some sort of registry. It's just not practical. And frankly, with our HIPAA laws, our privacy laws, it's not feasible. And what we know time and time again is that it's law-abiding people who have a handgun who often end up in some sort of violent situation. Whether it's because of alcohol, rage, who knows. So I think our country needs to continue to work on this issue, and I think we need to start with really fully banning the sale of privately owned assault weapons in Massachusetts.
Okay, now that we've dealt with guns, Ms. Harrington, please state your stand on the death penalty. And we'd like just a short answer here.
Sure. I am opposed to the death penalty. I think all the research that has been conducted on it over the years has shown that it is not a deterrent. It doesn't deter people from committing heinous crimes. If it were, maybe we would consider it. But on a moral basis, I simply can't condone a life for a life. It's not the moral and ethical foundation of my life and how I was, how I was brought up. Further, of course, there's the extreme costs of somebody being on death row and the endless amount of appeals. I mean, it's not practical from a simple cost analysis either. And then there's the fact that we're one of the only very few countries in the world that still even have a death penalty. Maybe the only developed country. I'm not really sure on that. So for many reasons, primarily the moral and ethical reason, I am opposed to the death penalty.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lott?
I think my problem with the death penalty is that sometimes innocent people do get killed as a result of it. I'm not comfortable with having one person who's innocent die, even if that means 99 guilty people die. That being said, I'm not 100% opposed to it. I think for really, really bad crimes where we truly know 100% that someone is guilty, for example, like Mr. Tsarnaev, the Boston bomber, I stand with the Justice Department's their decree of capital punishment on him, but I think it really needs to be exercised very, very rarely with truly 100% confidence and in very, very heinous and vicious crimes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lott, if the state Senate were asked to take up a bill about assisted suicide, which side would you stand on and why?
Okay, I would stand on the side that says that someone who wishes to die, they have a right to die. Frankly, if someone really wants to kill themselves, they don't need assistance. They can go to a top of a building and they can do it. And someone who's in truly, horrible pain, they should not be denied the right to end life on their own terms. If they do, if they actually go through with it and they kill themselves with euthanasia or something, you can't charge them with anything because they're already dead. It's not my right to tell other people how they can live for the most part, and it's not my right to tell people how they can die if they want to die, and as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else.
Ms. Harrington?
I think that illegality of assisted suicide currently puts a tremendous pressure on caregivers who are seeing their loved ones suffer, sometimes needlessly. Knowing that the end is near, sometimes there is a hope to end somebody's suffering sooner. And frankly, this happens all the time, and we probably know that our doctors, our prescribers, provide a little extra painkiller, and somebody goes peacefully to sleep. So I think we should deal with the reality of what's actually happening. A couple of years ago, there was a ballot question on assisted suicide, and I believe at the time I actually voted against it. And it was because it was, I think, overly broad and not well, constructed. I think there are things we can do to ensure that somebody is in their right frame of mind and not simply chronically depressed. There's certainly, psychological services that we can first give to a person, or that we can require that somebody undergoes some sort of mental health assessment before that's made. Because I'm not in favor of somebody, what we're talking about is assisted suicide. People do end their life all the time. But I think punishing people who help somebody end their life, if it's for a terrible medical condition or terrible medical pain, makes no sense to punish the loved one, to give them a criminal record because of that. So I think we should think about legalizing assisted suicide, and I think we should think about how we do it, and I think that we should make it very clear that we want people, the ill person, to be in their best frame of mind when making this decision. So that's right.
Okay, thank
There I
you.
am. Thank you.
Ms. Harrington, legalization of marijuana, your views, please.
Yep. A few years ago, I probably would have said, sure, legalize marijuana. There's, I wasn't aware of any research that showed that's any more of a gateway drug than alcohol. It seems like it's a free choice issue. And we have decriminalized it. Now it is, you can carry an ounce or ounce and a half and not be arrested for carrying a certain amount of personal marijuana on you. But I am concerned. I think now that we have states that have legalized marijuana, I think we should wait for some of the research coming out of those states. And what we're finding out of Colorado is that adolescents are using marijuana at a much higher rate than they are here in Massachusetts. There's some evidence out of Washington State. I think it was a Harvard public health school study that showed that car accidents had increased dramatically in the period that marijuana's been legalized. Now, I know that all studies, there's a difference between a correlation and a causation, but I'm probably most concerned about that adolescent usage of marijuana. And I think we should wait a few years, find out what the research is, see what happens with our own legalization of medical marijuana here in Massachusetts. We're only kind of broaching that right now. And I think if we roll that out and see where we are 2, 3, 4 years from now, we'll be in a better place to decide if we want to do this and to decide how exactly we want to do it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's the questions that we're going to ask tonight. That's all we have time for.
Do I get to answer
We
that?
do want to have a few questions from the audience.
Question?
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed you.
Thank you. Okay, so full disclosure, I have smoked marijuana. Oh no. Yeah, President Obama smoked. It's not like something that will ruin your life. I don't believe it's a gateway drug. And if you believe that the adolescent rate has actually gone up in Colorado after that, you can check my Twitter feed. About a week or two ago, I posted a link to a different study that said it hasn't actually gone up. I don't know the rate relative to Massachusetts and Colorado, but the research that's been coming out of Colorado right now has been incredibly promising. I believe that if Massachusetts legalized marijuana, even at the low tax rate that it is, and it is lower than Colorado's by a great deal, that we can take all of there's so much money to be made off cannabis, and we can put it towards drug prevention, especially for the opioid epidemic. That can help buy Narcan, it can buy needles. The drug war has been an absolute failure in this country and in Massachusetts. Even though it's decriminalized, that's great. We really need to go farther. I think Massachusetts, we've been a trailblazer in so many different other things. This is another thing that we can be. We won't be first, we won't be second, but we can be fifth or sixth or whatever it is now. And I guarantee that California is going to legalize this year. Maine might legalize. I'm proud to say I have the endorsement of Renee Ruiz from Milton, who is the director of the Marijuana Policy Project. I collected about 4 or 5 or 6 signatures to get this on the ballot. It's overdue, frankly. And we really ought to legalize it. I urge all of you to legalize it, or to vote to legalize it as well. There's been studies that said that states that have medical marijuana have fewer overdoses, and it stands to reason that full recreational and regulated and taxed would also cut down on overdoses from opioids and painkillers and stuff like that. So I really think the benefits are so numerous, and the drawbacks are comparatively few.
Thank you. Well, now let me say once again, that's about all the questions we have time for. If there's anybody in the audience who has a question, would like to bring it up, we have about 5 minutes of time for that. Go ahead. Please use the microphone.
So this question is about charter schools. So recently there was a proposal to increase the number of seats at the charter school in Foxborough, and there are also 2 proposals for charter schools in Brockton, one of which would include access to Stoughton students. And of course, there's the ballot question that's coming up in November regarding the expansion of charter schools. So I would like candidates, I would like to hear from them about their opinions about the charter schools generally and those 2 proposals specifically. Thank you.
Why don't we start with Mr. Lott?
Cool. All right, so I don't know anything about the Foxborough one, so I'm not going to speak to that. Brockton, I think they probably could benefit from having another charter school, although honestly, if you live in Stoughton, you probably don't want to send your kids to a charter school when you have a beautiful new high school opening up in a few years. So I'm a high school teacher and a middle school teacher, so you'd think that I'd be very anti-charter school. Honestly, I'm a little mixed. I am going to vote in favor of lifting the cap on charter schools, and this is coming from an educator again. But I think that there needs to be a lot of work done in charter schools in order to make sure that there aren't a bunch of for-profit companies that come from out of state into towns and basically are subsidized by the government. I think that any charter school that is going to be built in Massachusetts needs to have the approval of the town that it's going to be built in, whether that means the selectmen vote in favor of it or it's an entire town-wide initiative that they vote for it. Anytime you build a new school, whether it's a charter school or a traditional public school, you are going to be taking resources away from another school. That's just what happens when you have more schools. But charter schools or any more schools, they reduce class sizes, which as an educator, I tell you, is the best thing that you can do if you want to improve a child's education. Lower the class size, lower the student-to-teacher ratio. I do think there's work to be done in charter schools for sure, and the ones that are failing should have their charter revoked. I tend to think that innovation does not come from the public sector. I think that is, as an economics major, I hope you believe that too. And there are things that charter schools add to the debate. There are bad charter schools that ought to be shut down. It's a nuanced issue. It's not just black and white. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Harrington.
I am against lifting the cap on charter schools. I know in some areas, City of Boston, Springfield, there are concerns that parents need a choice because of their concerns around the public school system. And I do understand that. However, public schools serve all of our children. They serve, with a charter school, you have somebody who's advocating to get you there. And that's a wonderful thing. And if you are a child and you have that person in your life already, you're already got to step up. You already have a step up in life. Our public schools are serving kids with disabilities, English language learners, and many, many children who don't have parents who can advocate for them for whatever reason. Their parents simply don't have the wherewithal to advocate for them. And that's where my concerns are. I think we have to keep the money in our public school system to build the strongest school systems that we have so that all kids can get a good education and not just that the lucky few get to go to a charter school. That is fairness to me. And given the issue that charter schools can come into a town and build a school over the, even without the approval of selectmen or school committee members, simply as a local control issue, that seems, kind of out of bounds as something we should have in our state. Charter schools were a very interesting idea when they were first proposed many years ago. They don't seem to have lived up to the promise to sharing that innovation with the public school system. That was the original idea for charter schools, is that they were going to be these laboratories and help improve our public schools. That doesn't seem to have happened, and I think we're at the stage where we should keep our resources in the public schools to create the best public schools possible.
We have time for maybe one more question.
Hi, I'm Eric Coleman, town meeting member. I had a question for Mr. Timilty, but I guess I'll wait for that. There was something on one of your websites about fracking. You're against fracking. I need a little more detail in what you're talking about, and maybe both of you can address that.
Sure.
Start with Ms. Harrington.
Happy to start, sure. Fracking is the sort of slang term for fracturing of the earth to achieve natural gas deposits that are much further down in the earth's core than normally they were. It's a new technology. However, it comes with a lot of environmental hazards. And at this time, I think there are many people who feel like this continued reliance on gas and sources that are not clean energy are just not the way to go. And all that money that we put into fracking and into pipelines and into creating more markets for the natural gas industry could instead go to clean energy. And if we want to preserve our planet, if we want to have an ozone layer, if we want to stop global warming, if we want to have our kids to have clean water and clean air, I strongly believe that that's the way that we need to go.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lott?
So Eric, I think you're going to have to wait a long time before Mr. Timilty answers your question. His campaign office is about 500 feet away from this building, but he hasn't showed up to a single campaign candidate forum or debate yet. So I wouldn't hold your breath. And I wouldn't say that fracking is a particularly new technology. It's been around for, I would say, at least 30 years. I think, so generally I'm anti-fracking, but really it comes down to two different things. And I urge you all to look into this when you come home. There's vertical fracking, which is basically when they send down a fracturing device deep into the earth, and they fracture the whatever it is, the earth, and they take the gas or the oil or whatever it is that they're fracking for. And there's also horizontal fracking, which is where they frack down and they frack to the side. So horizontal fracking is pretty bad, and you can read about cases in Oklahoma where there are like mini tremors and earthquakes and all sorts of environmental things. And it's true that anytime you are fracturing into the earth and you're releasing these chemicals, they're not chemicals that are great for the earth. So long-term, fracking needs to end. I'm opposed to horizontal fracking. Vertical fracking, I don't think we should have any new operations, and we should start to scale down our vertical fracking. We can't just stop it instantly. We do have energy markets that we have to be responsible to. So yeah, that's about my stance on fracking. And you can read about it. Also, I have a post on my blog, my website about it.
Thank you. Time for closing remarks. And who do we start with? I think you gave the opening remarks.
Right? I think I did.
And so you can start with the closing remarks.
Sure. Be happy to close. So I get 2 minutes for this too. Is that right? Okay. All right. So again, my name is John Lott. I will not be on the primary ballot. So please, if you like Nora, vote for Nora. If you like the absent guy, vote for the absent guy. Hopefully that you'll prefer me to whichever one of these two candidates wins in September, and you can vote for me on November 8th. So once again, I'm a lifelong Stoughton resident. I'm a town meeting member. I'm a middle school, high school teacher. I teach Latin. I'm not your typical politician. I vowed not to spend more than 3 terms as a state senator if I win, and I'd have to win re-election twice. But so I'm not a career politician. I'm not a typical politician. I don't wear suits. I don't go around and say the things, the non-committal answers that most politicians say. I'm pretty direct. I'm pretty straightforward. I'm honest. You might not like all the answers I have, but I don't like all the answers the Democrats have, and I don't like all the answers the Republicans have either. That's why I'm an independent. Please check out my website. I got my business card and my pamphlet. Both of them have a number that goes right to my cell phone in the back. It also has a lot more information on me, a nice picture. It's got my website. It tells you all about this district. If you like what you heard tonight, follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook, tell your friends about it. I can't talk to all of you one-on-one as much as I'd like to. There's just not enough time to talk to over 65,000 voters. So I need you to help me do it. Please check out my website. Please tell your friends about me. My name is John Lott. I'm an independent candidate, and I live in Stoughton.
Thank you. Ms. Harrington?
Great. Thank you all again for being here tonight. Thank you to Steve for being our moderator and to Robin for being our timekeeper. This is a very important race. Again, it's the first time in 18 years that we get to choose a new state senator. And unfortunately in Massachusetts, when people are elected into office, we have one of the highest rates of people not then being contested afterwards. So I think we do need more people to get up and run for office. And I'm eager to be an example, hopefully, to others in the community. In a forum like this, I couldn't answer all your questions, and we can talk afterwards, and I'm happy to try. So I want you to know, I guess, what the basis of my votes will be and kind of what my values are going into Beacon Hill. And as I thought about it, when I started to run this race, I came up, what I stand for is equal rights and equal opportunity. That was the way I felt I could summarize what I stand for. And I think that's what our country is all about, equal rights and equal opportunity. It's certainly what our parents and grandparents came here for, and it's what people still come here for. And if I go to Beacon Hill, I will vow to represent all people and to ensure that everybody's rights are protected and that we can expand opportunity as much as possible. And again, I want to go back to saying I would love to encourage more people to run for office. This is really important that our government really reflects who we are as a people and not only certain people. I think government as a lifetime career can go awry. Not always, but it certainly can. And I think the infusion of new ideas and new energy is so important to our democratic process. As I stated earlier, I am the only candidate in this race that supports a woman's right to make her own health care decisions. I'm the only candidate who will unequivocally support LGBT rights. But I want you to know that I will support everybody. I will advocate for women, for children, for our elders, for members of the LGBTQ community, and certainly for ethnic and religious minorities. We're all in this together, is how I think about it. And finally, I hope that everybody will get out and vote on September 8th. It's such an important election. If you want to learn more about me, please go to my website, electnoraharrington.com. Thank you all for being here. I hope to, and for watching at home, I hope to earn your support and your vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the candidates who came, and best wishes to those who couldn't. I want to thank also Stoughton Media Access, SMAC, and Jeff Pickett, who is in the control room over there, videotaping everything and broadcasting it live. I want to remind everybody to vote. I know it sounds silly. 1 out of 5, if history proves true, 1 out of 5 will vote. 1 out of 5 registered voters. So you're voting for 4 others. Without your vote, it isn't we the people. And those of you who have seen me on TV know that I like to end everything with a thought for the week. And here is: a politician thinks of the next election, a statesman of the next generation. That's from James Freeman Clarke, an American clergyman. Thank you once again. Thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for sponsoring this event and all the people who worked on it. My name is Steve Fradkin, and it's been nice.